Speak Arabic and I'll give you my next bet.
The phrase cracked through the VIP room like the snap of a whip, loud, arrogant, perfectly calculated to pull laughter from the men seated around the betting table. Sheikh Tariq al-Rashid leaned back in his white leather chair, wearing a slow, almost lazy smile, one loaded with power. The kind of smile that said, "I'm the one in charge." His guests, 2 American investors and the Sheikh's own advisor, laughed immediately, like a trained audience. The Aurelius Casino gleamed like a temple of indulgence in the heart of Las Vegas. Down in the main hall, golden lights reflected off massive mirrors, cutting the space into warm stripes that illuminated roulette, poker, and blackjack tables. Men in flawless suits and women in sparkling dresses moved between high-stakes bets and muffled laughter. The faint scent of expensive perfume floated through the air, blending with the steady clinking of high-value chips. Higher up, on the floor reserved for VIP players, the atmosphere shifted: silent luxury, French champagne, alert security guards, and eyes that evaluated everything and everyone as if they were part of a game. It was there, in the center of this world where money was treated like a toy, that the waitress Julia walked invisible, until she was seen by the wrong person. She was just the waitress serving drinks.
Invisible to some. An easy target to others. "Go on, girl," one of the Americans said, still laughing. "Show us." "Maybe she can't even say hello, Tariq," the other teased.
But the waitress remained still, measuring her breath carefully. She had faced humiliation before, but this one felt different. There was intention behind it. A kind of elegant cruelty. If you're curious to know how a simple waitress is going to answer the powerful Arab sheikh, hit that like button to push this story forward. The casino manager, standing discreetly near the door, held his breath.
He knew that look from the sheikh.
It was the look of a man used to testing limits and breaking anyone who failed to keep up. Tariq lifted his chin, staring at her as though she were an intriguing object rather than a human being. "Well," the sheikh pressed, drumming 2 fingers on the green felt of the table.
"If you understand even one word of my language, the next bet is yours."
The lights reflected off his gold ring. The guests leaned forward.
The whole room seemed to hold its breath.
The waitress felt her cheeks burn.
Not with shame,
but with something she couldn't afford to show here: indignation. She inhaled slowly, straightened her posture, and replied calmly.
"Sir, I don't." "You don't speak Arabic, of course," he cut in, laughing. "It's not for everyone. Certainly not for waitresses."
Another round of laughter. Even the security guard at the door looked away, uncomfortable.
Julia tightened her grip on the tray.
And in that exact moment, in the 1-second silence between humiliation and courage, something changed in her eyes.
A spark.
A shift. Something no one in that room had predicted.
No one, except her. But what came after that arrogant phrase wouldn't just silence the room. It would leave the sheikh himself speechless for the first time that night. If you also think this kind of pointless humiliation is absurd, write in the comments, arrogance. The silence that fell over the VIP lounge wasn't ordinary.
It wasn't the respectful quiet of seasoned gamblers.
It was a dense, almost electric silence.
The kind that forms when people anticipate a fall that seems inevitable. In the background, a pianist played soft notes, contrasting with the tense atmosphere that settled over the room as everyone waited for Julia's reaction. Sheikh Tariq al-Rashid tapped his finger on the green felt.
A small gesture, yet one that oozed impatience and dominance.
The waitress, still holding the tray with untouched drinks, felt the weight of every gaze cutting through her skin.
"Come on," one of the Americans said, swirling a glass of ridiculously expensive whiskey. "Let the girl try. We could use some entertainment before the next round."
His smile was the smile of a man who had never known the meaning of the word limit. Tariq leaned forward. The arrogant gleam in his eyes made it clear how much he enjoyed this game.
Not the one with cards or roulette, but the social one, the game of testing someone's breaking point.
You heard them, he said, his voice velvety yet sharp.
Speak. Any word. Impress us. A loaded pause.
A pause crafted to stretch out the humiliation.
Julia held her composure. A discipline she didn't learn at the casino,
but in the tight hallways of her international relations department, where she always needed to prove her worth twice as hard as everyone else. Sir, I really should continue my work, she said, with an almost rehearsed calmness. But calm was not the Sheikh's goal.
He wanted a spectacle.
Work, he repeated, with a slow smile.
If you fail, you go back to work.
If you succeed, the next bet is yours.
Simple.
Laughter returned, softer, sharper. Julia felt her heart race.
Not from fear, but from decision. Because deep down, very deep down,
she knew perfectly well that this man had no idea who he was trying to humiliate. The room's lights reflected once more on the Sheikh's golden ring. And it was exactly that reflection,
that tiny symbol of the Al-Rashid dynasty, that cracked open an unexpected door. A memory. A study. A piece of information. And then,
for the first time, she smiled. A subtle, controlled smile, but filled with the kind of courage no casino chip could ever buy.
The Sheikh didn't know it,
but he had just challenged the wrong person. In the brightest and most dangerous place in Las Vegas.
For a moment, no one breathed.
The Sheikh's eyes,
used to slicing across rooms and intimidating executives with a single raised brow, narrowed when he noticed the tiny smile at the corner of Julia's lips. It wasn't insolence. It wasn't defiance. It was confidence.
And confidence, coming from someone he considered irrelevant, was something Tariq al-Rashid simply did not know how to manage.
Julia set the tray down on the side table with surgical precision.
She inhaled deeply, lifted her chin. The very gesture she had practiced countless times during her international relations presentations.
And finally spoke. But not in English. She spoke Arabic. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Tariq al-Rashid. May the honor of your house continue to prosper, just like the new energy agreement signed this week.
The sentence, delivered with flawless pronunciation, sliced through the air like a silent blade. The Sheikh's advisor let out a short sound, almost a choke. The two Americans froze with their glasses halfway to their mouths.
A single chip slid from the main stack and rolled to the edge of the table, forgotten.
Tariq, the man who never lost composure,
went still.
The silence deepened, as if the padded walls of the VIP room had swallowed every sound coming from the casino below. Even the pianist seemed to have stopped playing.
Julia continued. Without tremor, without hesitation, without arrogance.
And congratulations on the new contract with Washington. They talk a lot about the generous terms you offered, but few understand the real reason behind them. The Sheikh's eyes widened for a fraction of a second.
It was too fast for the others to catch. But for him, it felt like an eternity. She knew. She knew too much. You're trying to expand your family's influence without relying exclusively on the Asian market, aren't you? Strategic.
The advisor raised a hand to his forehead.
One of the Americans whispered. Holy, she actually speaks it. Another added. And understands politics.
Tariq took a long breath, but the air felt heavy. His arrogance faltered. Didn't vanish, but flickered like a candle touched by wind. Who are you? He asked, his voice lower than before, more human, almost hoarse.
Julia didn't answer.
She simply held his gaze.
Calm, dignified.
While the entire room, a room accustomed to $100,000 bets and billion-dollar secrets, remained frozen before an impossible truth. The waitress knew more about that man than anyone at that table.
And even more surprising, She spoke Arabic with respect, elegance, and precision. Not as a performance, but as someone who understood the depth of that culture. Tariq ran his thumb over his ring, the symbol of his dynasty, as if searching it for some logical explanation for what he had just witnessed. He found none, because there wasn't one. And in that moment, the very second his pride was forced to face its own reflection, something shifted in the Sheikh's expression. The arrogant man shrank. The intelligent man awakened. And with the cold clarity of someone who recognizes talent when they see it, he understood. He had just underestimated the most prepared person in that room. The golden lights of the Aurelius Casino reflected across the face of Sheikh Tariq al-Rashid, now completely different from the man who, minutes earlier, had mocked the waitress. Arrogance had given way to something rare. Genuine curiosity. He leaned forward, studying Julia as if trying to decipher an ancient code. "You surprise me," he said, his voice lower than anyone in that room had ever heard. "And I do not get surprised easily." The guests remained motionless, as though any movement might break the historic moment unfolding before them. Even the security guard straightened up, unable to hide his interest. The Sheikh gathered the remaining chips in front of him, an amount most people would never see in their lifetimes, and pushed all of them to the center of the table. "My promise still stands," he declared, looking at Julia with profound respect. "My next bet is yours." "The next bet is yours." The croupier, trained to maintain neutrality even in the face of fortunes, raised his eyebrows for a brief second. He rarely witnessed anything like this. "Choose," Tariq requested, his open hand offering the entire table as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The guests began murmuring. "Let her pick. Give the girl her moment. Come on, sweetheart, choose something lucky." Julia took a deep breath. Deep inside her chest, the echo of humiliation still pulsed. But above that, far above, there was something stronger. The certainty that she deserved to be there. She stepped closer to the green felt, her eyes slowly scanning the marked numbers. And she chose a simple one. Number 9. 9? One of the Americans asked. "Why that one?" Julia simply smiled. "It was my classroom number in college," she replied calmly. "The year I learned my first word in Arabic." The croupier spun the roulette. Lights danced. The room seemed to hold its breath. The small white ball raced along the track, ricocheting, leaping, falling, rising. Everyone leaned forward. Julia kept her gaze steady. The Sheikh did too. The ball slowed, bounced one last time, and dropped. 9. The table exploded in screams and laughter. The Americans shot up from their chairs. The security guard accidentally clapped once. Even the pianist outside lifted his head, as if he felt the vibration of victory. Julia brought a hand to her mouth, stunned. Not just by the luck, but by the feeling that something much bigger had just happened. Sheikh Tariq al-Rashid laughed for the first time that night. Not mockingly, but with genuine admiration. He gathered the winnings, a small fortune, and placed the entire amount in her hands. With respect. With almost ceremonial solemnity. "For you," he said. "A debt and an honor." Julia tried to refuse. "Sheikh, I can't accept." "You earned this," he interrupted firmly. "Not because of luck, but because you understand more than most people in this room." He stepped a little closer. "Tell me, Julia, how do you know so much? About my language? My culture? My business?" She held the money against her chest, breathed deeply, and answered with the honesty she had carried since her teenage years. "Because before I served tables, I served dreams." I studied international relations until the money ran out.
The room fell silent again. But this time, not out of humiliation.
Out of admiration.
The Sheikh nodded slowly, as if he had finally found the missing piece of a puzzle.
You shouldn't have stopped, he said. The world needs minds like yours. Julia smiled. Not out of pride, but because, for the first time since arriving in Vegas,
someone truly saw her. And in that VIP room, between golden lights and chips worth more than cars,
the destiny of the waitress who spoke Arabic
had finally changed. By the end of that night, beneath the glitter of Las Vegas and the distant murmur of million-dollar bets,
Julia walked out of the VIP room with something far greater than money.
She walked out with respect.
With a voice. With the silent proof that a person's worth can never be measured by the uniform they wear, the salary they earn,
or the arrogant gaze of someone trying to make them smaller.
In a world where many speak loudly, few have the courage to stand firm. But Julia did. And that alone made her extraordinary.
Because sometimes, the real bet in life isn't the one placed with chips on a table, but the invisible strength we carry inside us, even when no one believes.
And you? Have you ever lived a moment when you had to show you were worth far more than they expected? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story.
And if this narrative touched you in any way, leave your like and subscribe to the channel.
Here, every day, I remind you that dignity always defeats arrogance.